This allowed me to be taken seriously once I launched FeedHive. After 6 months or so, I was around 30,000 followers on Twitter, which made the whole thing with talking about FeedHive as the very first thing I ever did in terms of asking for people's money. It really made the difference in me being taken so much more seriously.
Hey, Bootstrappers! Welcome to Bootstrap Stories, the podcast where founders, marketers, and thoughtful leaders share the most actionable tips on building a successful business. After meeting with hundreds of bootstrappers in the past years, I figured out that we all struggle to grow our businesses. But the truth is that most of us don't know where to ask for help or advice. That's why I decided to start this podcast, to give you all the keys to succeed at every stage of your business. All the tested strategies for solving your struggles and taking your business to a new level. No fluff, no bullshit, only a real talk between friends that help each other succeed. Today, my guest for this episode is Simon Hooijberg, CEO and founder at FeedHive. Simon, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm super excited to get to know your story a bit better and talk also about your YouTube channel, because I think there is an interesting stories there as well. So can you maybe give us a bit of background on what is FeedHive, when did you start, and how big you are right now?
Absolutely. So FeedHive is a social media marketing platform that basically helps users create and scale their social media presence. And there's a high focus on workflow and productivity, and we're using AI and a lot of other cutting edge technology in areas to improve the impact of delivery. And we are currently around 200,000 ARR right now.
Nice, that's cool. And when did you started it?
It was founded a little more than a year ago, so very late 2020.
Okay, and how many people are in the team?
We are a team of 5 right now, contractors. So we actually don't have any employees.
And that's cool. And how did you come up with the idea? What made you start the business?
Well, it's actually, so to go back a few years back, I had just wrapped up another attempt at building a SaaS, which failed horribly. I made this very classical mistake of building everything in secret, thinking that there was actually a need. And as it turned out, no one really had the problem I was trying to solve. And I remember that the worst feeling from that experience was this feeling of yelling out into the void and having everything completely drown. So I posted the launch on Reddit and Twitter and Indie Hackers, and it was just completely drowning with between a lot of other people posting their products. And I remember I was one night reading a chapter from the book Rework, this book by the guys over at Basecamp. And one of the things they emphasized was the importance of building an audience and how important it was to have people's trust and attention when trying to roll out something new. So after that experience, I thought, this is it. I'm going to be building an audience, and the next SaaS I'll be launching is good. It might still fail. No one knows, but it's certainly not going to be from not being heard. I was very determined about that. And so I started posting on Twitter. I was already active on LinkedIn at the time, and I added Instagram to the mix, and it quite quickly came clear to me that I needed some sort of tool to scale this properly. And at this point, I tried out Hootsuite, which is the biggest social media management tool there is at the market right now. And I absolutely hated it. I tried Buffer and I absolutely hated it. And actually, I tried a bunch of these big tools, and I thought they were all really huge, monolithic, big and clunky and super slow tools. And so I tried with a bunch of other smaller tools that was built by other startups at the time, and they seemed much more decent, but they were very specialized at Twitter, and I was looking for something that I could use to manage all my social accounts. And at this point, I was like, where's the tool that I need? That the one that can both do new things like Twitter threads and do conditional posting, but that also has first-class support for both LinkedIn and Instagram, and where the software itself is actually fast and responsive and kind of meets the standard of a web application today. And I was I was imagining being an agency, having to sit and work in a tool like that all day long, where you need to click 79 times to get something done, and where the whole page needs to refresh every single time you click something. And so this is the point where I thought to myself, like, is this really it? Is there seriously still a need in the market, in this super crowded market as it is? And this is where I started paying more attention to discussions on Twitter and LinkedIn. And it actually did turn out that there were other users with the exact same issue as I had at the time. So a little bit further down the road, I collected a small group of 25 people on Twitter. And they were also active on platforms like LinkedIn and Instagram. And I actually started building an MVP just for these 25 people. And I invited them to start using the platform already after 2 weeks of building. And then we had a closed group, and I really we built the entirety of FeedHive's like backbone together, more or less. And everything in these next few months was kind of like something we discussed just in this small group, like how we had daily discussions about features and what would work the best and how should it be. And after these 2 months, I launched the thing in a public beta, and it did actually get quite a good amount of traction on both Twitter and LinkedIn. And already after a few weeks, we had the first 1,000-something MRR.
Nice.
And that was kind of the cue for me that, okay, that there's actually something here still. So that's where my focus has been. Yeah.
And I've got a question, because I think like in our audience, we have people who are just getting started up to like people making hundreds of millions in ARR. But for the one, who are getting started, I think like there is something super interesting in what you say. It's like, first is, doesn't matter if the market is crowded. If you can do better and you feel like there is a need, go for it and test it. I think the fact that you are doing it, and I think it's very like you did a master plan. It's like act quickly and test it and get feedback very quickly, like to improve your product. So I think you did it like in the best way possible, especially with the audience you had built. And the second thing, which is more like a question I have to you, is okay, you mentioned you have 25 users. So you took them from your audience, private beta, private group. In a practical sense, do you ask these people to pay for the product, or is it free at the beginning? And second question is like, where did you gather feedback? Was it a Slack? Was it a WhatsApp group?
Yeah. So as with the feedback, that was actually a Twitter group. So
Okay.
it's simply just on Twitter, you can do a group chat. And that was really where we communicated. Since we were only 25 people, it was manageable to do in a Twitter group like it. But it could have been just as well a WhatsApp group or a Slack server or something like that. And yes, in order to get these 25 users on board, I actually did offer them all a lifetime of free, unlimited usage on FeedHive.
Nice.
And so there's a bit of a leap of faith here, because clearly giving something for free does not necessarily resemble if a similar type of user would actually then be able to pay for it. There are certain biases. You can ask these users, would you have paid for it? And they would have gone, yes, of course I would. So there is definitely a certain leap of faith. I used my audience on Twitter at the time, having around 30,000 followers, to post screenshots often and post status updates on the progress and building in public, as they call it, to constantly make sure that there was actually some interest also from outside users. And in this time, I actually had users write to me and say openly that if I want to get in earlier, I really need this tool. I'll be willing to pay for it if I can get in early, also before a public beta launch that I had announced. And that was kind of a validation as well.
Nice. And I think this is really like interesting, because to me, even though a lot of people are saying like, yeah, you should sell before you build, you should and I do feel like right now, it's actually like more complex, because there are so many SaaS out there that, charging people on something that they haven't seen or whatever, it's kind of like the mirage, like people are like perceiving. And the way you did it, I think, is actually like a really smart way to build like a loyal audience, make them really involved in the growth of the product. And once you come like to that beta and, you launch it, you get like a good traction, you get to that like 1K in MRR. What do you think? Like, because the launch is always something, where it's exciting, you usually plan it, etc. And then you always have this kind of like, okay, the launch has passed. What do I do now?
Absolutely. I definitely agree. I think a combination works well because I'm actually very for charging people before they have the product as a like the ultimate validation. Yeah. But what happens often I've seen is that people tend to completely overpromise on what they're going to build. So they build a landing page and you will have all kinds of insane features. And that's really what people end up paying for because they get FOMO and it looks amazing. And they're not ever going to build even like 10% of all that. They probably even haven't covered if it's possible or if it's feasible to do so. And so like if you're charging users upfront, be sure that there's a certain, like that it's also realistic what you're charging for and what we can build. Like building with 25 people on the side of doing this and having them watching how they didn't lose interest over the course of 2 months and they didn't kind of bail out and stop replying in the group and so on. That was like a secondary validation that kind of backed that I could actually pull it off.
Nice. And I'm also curious, like to dig in a bit more, in like the audience part, because for you, it was obvious that this is the first thing that you're going to do. So going back to 2020, when you started, how big was your audience on Twitter at the time?
At the time I started doing FeedHive, my audience was around 30,000 followers. But to back down even a little bit before that, as I mentioned, when I was done doing my very first attempt at building a SaaS, I had no followers at all, and I was at this point very determined that I needed to build an audience fast, so that I could do this whole thing again and try it in a different way. And in the beginning, it also really didn't go well. I was impatient. And I was kind of in a hurry, and I had this very sharp focus on that I needed an audience so that I could get something out of it. And there is this sense of immediate self-promotion in mostly every piece of content I shared. There is this follow me now, and also follow me on this other platform, and subscribe to my newsletter. And I even kept actually promoting my failed SaaS back then in a desperate attempt of still getting users onto that platform. And it just didn't, like my agenda just shined through way too clearly. And I was actually getting quite frustrated with the whole audience building thing. But there was a point where I chose to completely change my strategy and decided to stop doing it the way that I have done. And then I wanted to try to do 2 months of just sharing value without asking for anything in return. And I was very determined on trying this 2 months, just putting the best stuff I got out there and not asking for anything, and just see what happened. Like no asking people to follow me and no asking them to sign up anywhere. And I was also ready to kind of like dump this whole thing if it didn't work. So in these 2 months, I had a goal that was like, I needed to get to 1,000 Twitter followers in 2 months of doing this. And this is really where things started to take off, because in fact, after doing this, after 6 weeks, I had more than 10,000 followers on Twitter. Nice. So this kind of pattern really seemed to work out, which is also where it got super clear to me that on social media today, we got so used to consume content that is there to provide value, but it's actually kind of a secret sales funnel in disguise. So I think as these kind of sales funnels got quite creative, a lot of users are kind of anticipating it a little bit. Every time they see something valuable, they're expecting like that attempt of converting them just around the corner. So for me, pushing out content for a long time, I actually did this for 6 months without asking for anything in return. This allowed me to be taken seriously once I launched FeedHive. And after 6 months or so, I was around 30,000 followers on Twitter, which made the whole thing with talking about FeedHive as the very first thing I ever did in terms of asking for people's money. It really made the difference in me being taken so much more seriously.
No, that's super interesting. And I want to dig in again, like a little bit like deeper, in all these things where you said, and I agree with you, actually. It's like most of the time when you see a valuable thread on Twitter, you are like ready to see at the end, like hey, this is my newsletter, by the way, where I sell a course about XYZ or something like this. So whenever you said like, okay, I was solely focused on Twitter and on audience building, was it basically like you writing tons of tweets or threads just to provide like a lot of value? Or were you also like engaging a lot with other people's tweet and, you know, like spending and also like second question, like how much hours were you spending each day basically?
But both good, two good questions. The first one, yes, it was a good mix of both engaging with other people on their accounts, especially trying to add value on, by the time, people that were way, way, way bigger and had a much larger following that I had. I think that's a great opportunity to actually get some traction on your own account. But it's important, again, that you don't do this in any kind of self-promotive way. So don't go in big accounts and just add a shameless plug as a comment. It won't really work. But if you can truly add value to their post without kind of stealing their thunder or trying to steal their traffic, not only will it be appreciated, these big accounts, they will start noticing. They might even at some point start retweeting your stuff because they think you're cool, you're engaging with their content and helping. But also a lot of people tend to upvote it or like it. So it actually kind of get hoisted to the top of that comment section. Most social media platforms does this. And this is actually an excellent way to direct traffic, way better than trying to hack engagement by asking people to follow left and right or put like 1,000 hashtags and hope that you end up in some place where people will see. Engaging is good. I'm very much for that part. To answer your other question, I think I spent at this time, I think I spent around 8 to 10 hours a week probably writing content, but I was very much scheduling ahead already from the beginning. Also before I started doing FeedHive. So putting aside a good Sunday to just sit and come up with content allowed me to still have some time during the week to engage and to do other things.
Okay. And how much time would you spend engaging? Like, is it like 1 hour per day or something like that? Or
probably, 30 minutes to 1 hour a day. Probably, I think on a weekly basis, it was probably a 50-50 split.
Nice.
It's not anymore. I engage less today. That's admitted. I'm also having a bigger audience now on multiple platforms so that it becomes hard to keep up. But back then, it was probably like a 50-50 split.
Nice. And how big right now is your audience on Twitter?
I have just around 100,000 followers on Twitter and around 25 on Instagram, 30,000 on LinkedIn, and just around 12,000 on YouTube.
Nice. And talking about YouTube, like, because we are in your studio right now.
Yes, we are.
Which is cool. Like, why did you start it? Like the channel? When did you start it? And like, I've read that you made some money out of it, so I'll ask a question afterwards. But let's get to from the start.
Yes, absolutely. When I was starting to do content, I was actually quite, I already kind of made up my mind that I did not want to do YouTube. I thought it was too time consuming. I didn't know a lot about editing, and there was too much to learn, I felt, while also trying to build a SaaS and keep up an audience on other channels. But I started doing these small videos on Twitter. It was these like quick 2-minute videos of me explaining something. It could be about JavaScript or how to get freelance clients. And this was slightly before the whole shorts and reels thing like really exploded. And you didn't see a lot of these short videos, and especially not on Twitter. So my brand kind of got known a little bit for these small videos. People really liked them. And in the course of like, I think the next 6 months or so, people kept asking me to please create a YouTube channel. And I was kind of a little bit stubborn about really not wanting to get into that. And at some point I thought like, I can create a channel and just put these short videos there so they don't drown on Twitter. Then people can find them more easily. And more or less overnight, I had the first 1,000 subscribers or so. And I was starting to read about some of all the benefits you actually get from a channel audience. And I got more and more into the idea of actually running a YouTube channel professionally alongside my SaaS. And it didn't, when I started doing videos more deliberate and more intentional for YouTube, it didn't take long before I found out that I absolutely loved it. It is very fun, and I think for me, it's really added a great outlet for the more creative side of me personally. While running a SaaS is a little bit more management and systems and programming and these kinds of things, YouTube videos has a creative component to it that I really, really enjoy. And it also added the factor that for me, having multiple things to work on at the same time is actually what prevents me from burning out personally. It might sound counterintuitive, but if I were to constantly focus on one thing like FeedHive, it would be I would really feel that it would be exhausting. It would be like flexing the same muscle constantly without a break, and just having to switch between these two things that I take YouTube almost as seriously as a business as I do my SaaS, and having these two things to switch between now, it really added a lot of like diversity in what I do on a daily basis, and it actually prevents me from burning out.
I 100% agree with that. I think like if you yeah, yeah, having multiple projects for me, and when you say it's counterintuitive, like it's true because people don't understand it. It's like for them, it's like if you feel like you're working too hard on something, they would say like just rest. But for me, like working on something else is actually rest. You know, it's like it's just I'm doing something else. Agree. Like my brain is not. Yeah, it's not the same muscle.
And it's like that thing where you sit down and try to relax, and you tell yourself you need to take a break, but in that break you do nothing but think about that thing that you still haven't solved. It doesn't really work. While switching to something else, absolutely agree that it really does relax you even more, I think.
Yeah, it's actually like what you said is definitely true. Like if you compare it to just sitting and just thinking about like the same problem. And for people who don't know like about your channel, like can you give us a bit more like who are you targeting on your channel? Like how much video have you posted? What's kind of like your strategy?
Yeah, so I the topic of my channel is online business. So I talk obviously a lot about SaaS and building a SaaS business, but I actually also cover things like I'm selling ebooks as well. So I cover how to launch and sell info products, and I'm experimenting with other types of online business strategies. Like I've tried a bit of doing drop shipping, and I'm covering different approaches and different ideas you as especially as a technical person, as a programmer, can approach to try to start with your own business. And I think I have posted around 60 videos at this point.
So do you do like do you have like some sort of calendar where you're like, okay, each week I'm posting a video, or is it like more I'm posting when I have like really good content?
I have a calendar, and this is also I started with this in 2022, so it's actually recently I aligned this up. But this has to do with the fact that there has been an increasing interest from sponsors in sponsoring some of my videos. And this has made me schedule things and kind of trying to publish things on a schedule. So I do one big video every other week, and then I do 2 shorts in the week that I don't post a big video. And while this is it's less than a lot of other upcoming YouTubers would do, and what some other professional YouTubers would advise you to, but that's how it works for me. I like to add a good amount of quality in the videos that I do post, and I do at this point everything myself, from scripting, filming, editing, and in a busy day of also running a startup. This is what I can do.
Yeah, that's really impressive, and that's awesome. And you know, I think I read somewhere, I'm not sure if it was in your tweet or an article, like that you were making about like 4K per month on YouTube. Is that's correct?
Yes.
And the money comes from mainly like sponsors?
Mainly sponsors.
Okay.
Well, around 70% sponsors. And then I have the remaining 15% is ad revenue. And then I have ebook sales, which I talk about my ebook sales in some of my videos, and I put a link. And the remaining 15% is the sales I can track back to these videos.
And I think this is like so interesting, because I think your channel on YouTube, it's I think I was checking it earlier, it's about like 12K, right, followers? Yeah, 12.6. Yes. So yes. 13K, and you're making around like 4K per month, which I think is like the dream for a lot of people and content creators.
I think so.
do you feel like the fact that you really like niched your YouTube channel was key? Because obviously when I'm on it, it's like online business, tech, and SaaS startup, which is like pretty well segmented, I would say.
Yes, I think so. Yes, I also think that to the average YouTuber, I wouldn't sit here and tell everyone that when you reach 13,000 subscribers, you can make 4,000 a month, because that's probably, like, statistically probably not going to be true. So it very much has to do with multiple factors. With ad revenue, I'm making around $500 a month on ads, but that's also significantly higher than the average person with my view count and my subscriber count. But that simply has to do with the topic I picked. So YouTube doesn't pay the same amount of money for people's ads. They pick based on demand. So there are certain topics and certain keywords that's in higher demand. So advertisers are willing to bid higher in an auction to have ads shown on these types of videos compared to other types of videos. And that's where if you're going to do a programming channel or gaming channel, you're not going to reach as high ad revenue as if you do online business, e-commerce, personal investment, these kinds of topics. They're among the highest in terms of ad revenue. Yeah. And in terms of sponsorships, I'm also charging my sponsors a fair amount of money for sponsoring a video. And it is very much with this implicit promise that I am taking this very seriously and that I am very determined on reaching 100,000 subscribers this year. And right now it's a very good investment, because when I reach that point, it will be significantly more pricey to sponsor one of my videos. And this is evergreen content. So a video that they put now, it will keep delivering for maybe even years to come. So it will be a very good investment to actually put money into my channel now. And this is kind of my selling proposition when I talk to sponsors. So I am charging more than the typical YouTuber my size does for sponsoring a video, for sure.
No, but I think you have like the best sales pitch for that. It's it makes sense. It's like invest now. Look at me on the other and you have also like, I would say the social proof to back it up. Like you can just say, okay, look at my Instagram, look at my like Twitter account, look at like my LinkedIn. It's not as if you were like just a random dude who started on YouTube and charging a lot of money. So the end goal for this year is 100K followers. So what's kind of like the strategy? Do you do like SEO content? Do you try to find like your own and unique format? Do you just because whenever you're growing an audience on a social network, I mean, one strategy is to look at people who are succeeding and try to kind of like do the same but your own way. So how do you approach like the strategy on YouTube?
It's a great question. I notice now that I'm starting to rank high on a bunch of my videos when you search for SaaS, especially when on YouTube, if you search for SaaS tech stack, I have a few videos that comes up as the first ones. But from what I can see already at this point, I don't really get that much traffic from search. And I am very much aiming for content that is engaging and is going to catch your attention on what in YouTube terms they call the browse features, which is basically the homepage. This is where I get by far the most of my traffic. So people see my thumbnails and my videos in this grid of a lot of videos, and they click there and they stay long enough that YouTube's algorithm determines that this content is good enough to start putting on new people's homepages. And this is the way I get subscribers. So my strategy is more focused around making something that people will catch on the homepage rather than search for it.
Nice. And how much time do you invest? Because if your goal is to kind of like almost 10x, a bit less, maybe 9x, what's the amount of hours you're willing to spend each week?
That's a good question. I actually haven't done the math, but I spend a fair amount of time on it.
Okay.
Not full time, but
weekends.
Okay. I was probably also more than weekends. I probably spend a few hours planning, scripting, writing, and stuff like that per day on YouTube at this point. Yeah.
And each video you put out is scripted.
Yes.
Okay. And you do it with like a prompter, or it's more like a script in general, and then you just
I do script, and then I have a teleprompter. I'm looking at it right now, so you can't actually see that it's up in front of me.
Nice.
And this is where, and this is very different from different YouTubers, how they find the flow better. I am non-native English speaking, so I quickly get into a kind of ramble if I just freestyle it. So I script my content and I read it. yeah, exactly right. And I actually read up word by word. 95% of it I do improvise a little bit, but 95% of it is just me reading up from a script while I sit there. Yes.
And I feel like, I mean, to me, it's like whenever you're scripting, if you are the one writing the scripts, it's still you. So it feels natural. Like it's not as if you took like a fancy word and you put it out out there and just reading someone else's text. So.
I think so. 100% agree. I put a lot of effort into making these small annotations in the script. So I add make a small pause here and emphasize this word. And I have this little system where when I read it on the prompter, I kind of know, or I'm reminded how I'm supposed to deliver it in a way that doesn't feel too like reading up.
Yeah, I understand. I think it's actually really smart to do it. And I know a lot of people when they get started with audience building, something that they ask a lot is, how do you find your content ideas? So for you, do you get inspiration from other YouTubers? Do you get inspiration from Twitter? Do you how do you choose the format? Is it something you've seen you like and you try to adapt it? What's kind of the strategy and thought process around the creation phase?
I'm a big fan of copying what I can see works well on other channels. So it's a good mix of multiple things. I look at similar channels that has a similar audience and try to see which kind of themes and topics does well. And now I have an audience on both YouTube and obviously on Twitter that's big enough that I can also listen to demand. So people asking me, if I see a question being asked over and over, I see that this is a good occasion to actually cover something that people keep asking. But I do have, I'm a big fan of incorporating storytelling into my videos. It is something that has increased the retention rate for my videos tremendously since I started putting more focus into that. So I also have this kind of checklist of things that a topic or a theme needs to pass in order for me to be able to make a good video out of it. One of them is, can I fabric or tell a good story about it? Because if I just have to sit and answer a question and kind of deliver, then it's not going to be a very good video. I need to be able to make something exciting out of it before I can post.
And based on your experience so far, what have you seen has the highest impact? Because on YouTube, I've seen a lot of people talking about the thumbnails, talking about the titles, talking about changing 20 times the thumbnails to get more traction eventually. What's your mindset and approach when it comes to thumbnails? Do you create them in advance prior to recording, or how do you think through all of this?
Yes, I actually do. Because I do think that the thumbnails and title are, especially in the way I'm trying to target traffic from the homepage, are extremely important to have them nailed down well. So my process for doing this is kind of I go through the idea and then I'm thinking, is there something to this that I can create something exciting about? Then I go on to create title and thumbnail. And again, I see this as a kind of step that I need to pass in order to improve. If I cannot make an exciting title out of it or make a thumbnail that very clearly gives the right associations, then probably the idea is too vague or it's just not really gonna catch the audience properly. And I found that this way of doing it, I actually end up making both title and thumbnails and sitting there and being stuck with it. And I ask a few people in my network, what do you think? And if people go it's just not, I know I wouldn't click it, then I discard it. And I'm not afraid of doing that and just say okay, but then I can't make a good idea out of this because I do want it to work before I start putting in the big effort of actually filming and editing.
So just to I understand everything. So it's you have the idea of a content. you're going to try to think about the title and the thumbnail. And if you can't find it, you just don't write the script and don't do like the editing? Or do you actually like write the script, then try to find out like a title and a thumbnail? And if you can't, then you stop?
No, I do the thumbnail and title first before scripting. And if I can't make that work, if either I just struggle with getting the right thumbnail and the right title in place for this idea, I don't go on from there. And I have this, like I typically paste it into the grid. I take a screenshot of the grid on YouTube on the homepage, then I put my title and thumbnail in there. And then I have, I use this test on my own thumbnails and titles that I think is really good. I saw this from someone else, that you should kind of create it. Then when you look up 1 second and then you look away, this is how much time you have to catch people's attention. If you're not able to create the right association in that 1 second, then it's not going to work in a huge grid with a bunch of videos on the homepage. So I do that, and then I screenshot it, and then I send it to some people so they can see it along with a bunch of other videos on YouTube, and then ask them, like, would you click this? Is it good enough? And I'm in some closed networks of people. They're very brutally honest with me and let me know that no, it's just not no. And then and from there, no, I don't go on to write the script, and I certainly don't go on to film and edit, because then I just know that there's like too many indicators that this video will flop.
That's really, really interesting. I love the process, and I think it's really insightful. And do you feel like writing on Twitter was actually helpful for you, like to find, like this? Because the thumbnails and also like the title are two things where you need to be catchy, intriguing, and like hooked the person. And Twitter, you are limited in characters whenever you want to write. So do you feel like both are kind of like complementary, and it was helpful for you to do those two things at the same time?
I would say so. It's not something that I ever thought a whole lot about, but yes, I would say so. I actually do think that the idea and that on Twitter you have a limited amount of characters does help you take an idea and making it as concise as you possibly can. And in terms of writing titles, it's actually more challenging than you would think, coming up with a good title, a good short title.
I think it's the hardest, like people like even like at Ogilvy or this type of thing, like they were spending like days and days, because a title is like a tagline, like down the line, if you want it to be impactful, you need to spend time.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned that you have like around like 25K, I think, on Instagram. So I'm curious, like what type of content do you post? What was like your growth strategy? How did you get started?
Well, on Instagram, it's very different. I post almost only programming content there. And I have Instagram and a little bit Facebook is very purposefully for the part of my audience that is mostly interested in software development. And that's because I sell 2 ebooks that is about software development. And I do like 98% of all my revenue come from running Facebook ads. And these ads are mostly seen on Instagram. And this works super well, especially having an audience on Instagram really, really serves well as a social proof. Because believe it or not, they will like your ad. They will hit the like button and it will show. And when people see an ad, one of the first things people do is obviously to go in. They click on your profile to see who's this dude that's selling this JavaScript book. And they will now see, okay, there's like a lot of followers. He's very engaging. Like a lot of people like his stuff. He's helpful in the comments and like explaining things. So this makes the ads work much better. And when you get this sort of engagement, Facebook actually gives you a tiny reward. So you get slightly cheaper ads, and you're also able to dominate in an auction if your content is actually engaging and good for the platform. So my Instagram following serves this particular purpose. Of course, creating value for my followers, but it is really working well with selling my info products through these platforms. It does not work very well for me on Twitter. For some reason, I do it. Whenever I have a viral tweet, I do plug it and be like, but I see some other people really killing it with that method. It's not something that works particularly well for me.
And I'm wondering, like on Instagram to get to that 25K, was it mainly driven through ads, or did you have like a proper strategy in place from day one that you are continuing, where you post content daily, do stories, do all these type of things?
Yes, stories, post content. Again, it actually does help on Instagram as well, engaging with other users. But I didn't run ads in the beginning because they were ineffective. Okay. Because there's just, people see a lot of ads every day on these platforms. So the social proof really matters a lot. Having these ads with no engagement on, they're ineffective and they get expensive. But what I actually did in the beginning was that I found big profiles that was open for promotion, and then I paid them to share my content and give me a mention. And this is a strategy that works better on Instagram that I have seen anywhere else.
So if I understand correctly, you're gonna find like influencers who are, for example, talking about developers or like your niche.
Yes.
And then you ask them like to plug one of your content or the mention? Or?
Yes, there are channels on Instagram that does nothing but share other people's content. So there's, for instance, one for JavaScript, and they post very rarely their own content. So they actually go through Instagram and collect all the best of the best, and they put that into there. And people love to follow these Instagram profiles. It's kind of like a curated content on one profile. And of course, these accounts, they're very polite about mentioning you in these comments when they share, so they don't steal people's stuff. They repost it and give you the right mentions. But you can also occasionally pay them if you're still small and they haven't found, they're not willingly sharing your content for free yet. Then you can pay them to do so, and you can direct an enormous amount of followers like that. So and it's an interesting strategy that I have only found working well on Instagram. I tried actually writing to a bunch of YouTubers that are a bit bigger than I am now, asking them if they're up for a paid channel shout out, but nope, no one's in on that. It's just like,
and what's can you give us maybe like a bit of numbers for people to realize? So it's like, would you pay them, I don't know, like $1,000, $2,000, and how many like followers?
Not anything close to that. Okay. I had a big Instagram account with, at the time, around 800,000 followers. I paid around $150 for a post that was going to be there. And then a story was also included, which is going to be there for 24 hours. And then he would have my name in his bio for 24 hours. Wow. $150 all included. And the amount of, if you have good content, the amount of followers you get from that is actually, you can beat the price of most ad platforms if you have followers as an objective. It is, at least on Twitter.
So that would be like how much followers would you got from there?
I can't remember exactly how much, but I remember I calculated it down to around 10 cents per follower.
Okay.
I got from some of these promotions. So a lot.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And I actually have seen like, people's strategy on social media. Down the line, like people were criticizing a lot, people trying to just grow their audience at all cost, or buying followers, or doing all these things. But then I saw a guy who said something that was, I don't remember his name, but it was quite interesting, saying that in the end, your audience is like your best investment. So instead of like trying to kind of like push ads or content or whatever, like what you could do is just push people to follow you. And then down the line, they are going to be on the funnel, because you're going to put like a lot of stories, a lot of things. And down the line, your story is going to be about, hey guys, by the way, I've got like this helpful ebook or whatever. And then, like they can become customers.
100%.
So is it something you've also implemented in your ads, where you're actually pushing potentially like your most performing content organic, and then push it with your ads just to drive more followers? Or whenever you do ads, you're more like, okay, I want like to calculate my ROAS, like return on ad spend, and just make sure that I'm making good money, the ROI is positive. And
the last part, I actually never boost, as they call it, any of my organic content. I always separate it, and I do that for multiple reasons. But one of them is being able to track my return on ad spend specifically. But we do have, I actually have the ads that I'm running for my personal brand for my ebooks is just this like one ad. I have a tiny funnel and some retargeting, but we're also getting most of our users on FeedHive from running ads. And here we have a much more sophisticated multi-step funnel set up on Facebook with a whole retargeting sequences of highlighting different features to people that have been on our website for so and so long. It gets much more complex, and we never start selling anything on the very first ad we present the cold audience with. Whereas on my ebooks, they're also so cheap. They're $19 right now. I'm doing it's like $29 and $19 on a sale. So you can kind of like target cold audience, saying like, here, there's people a little bit more willing to go in for an impulse purchase. And if not, visit your website, and now I can retarget them with something else in the smaller. Yeah.
No, and that's cool. I think like I want to jump back on what you said about like your funnel and ad funnel with FeedHive. So can you walk us through a bit, like someone's on your website, spending a bit of time on it, like how much time and how did you retarget them? Like what's kind of the classical funnel that you are doing?
Well, we are the classical funnel we're doing is I promote something, either blog post or some content on our site. So that could be best alternatives to later. We have an article about that, or whenever something new comes out, like Canva just announced that they will have a scheduler in their app. So we wrote a blog post about, is it worth it to use Canva as a social media scheduler? Of course, we mentioned FeedHive in these articles, but we post this kind of like relevant content to our cold audience. Then we start retargeting these people that visited the blog post with more ads about social media and the benefits. And now we're moving them from what you call in marketing terms, we're moving them from unaware to problem solution aware. And then we even have another sequence after that. When people have been engaging with the retargeted audience, we start talking about discounted offers, trials, sign up for FeedHive here, and some of the more benefits that we have. And we do experiments with this constantly, but with such a super competitive space that we're working in, that is social media schedulers. You can't just promote an ad saying like, sign up for my product here. People are not going to do it. So you need to warm them up and make them feel a bit comfortable with your brand and your product, and make them recognize certain patterns of text and graphics. And we have an in-house graphic designer who's excellent, as he's killing it with these kind of like recognizable brand pieces of creatives. And then we have an agency doing content for us. So that's both targeted for SEOs who go on Google, but it's also really deliberately written in a way that works well on ads and attract people to get on our website. But it's a much more complicated setup to direct users from cold to sign up for a product. And it gets more complicated, obviously, calculating the acquisition cost of a single user, but it's exciting.
I think it's, I really love it, and I love the way you explained it, and it makes like so much sense. You know, it's, because getting interrupted all day long with ads, or people who want to kind of like force you to buy something down the line, like people are fed up. So if you can lead with value on a cold audience with a specific topic, and right now I think like the algorithm like know how, with content to find like the right people who are going to like it. Then the ones that are very relevant, you retarget them with, again, like additional content. But something you mentioned that I really loved, and I think it's super smart of you guys like to do that, is keeping the same branding, like being highly recognizable, both on the design side and also on the copy side, because as you said, like your brand is also like your tone, your voice, and making sure that everything is recognizable. So whenever you do like additional touch, then and only then, when you know that they are hot, okay, here's the sign up button, and people will convert.
Yes.
No, that's super cool. And what are like kind of like the challenges for you in the coming months or years? Like, because you obviously have like FeedHive, which is like growing, and it's a SaaS, so it's like this different business model, and then you also have like your info products and the other things you do. So it's like, where do you feel like the most challenge?
It's obviously challenging making time for everything and managing doing multiple things at once like this, where I, as I mentioned, I do get super motivated by having to shift. But right now, at this very moment, I'm actually at a place where I can feel both of these things, YouTube and FeedHive, is starting to take off faster, and I need to recruit people to help me out with more things, which is we don't have all the proper structures for onboarding new employees and new contractors yet. So that's still a very manual me going through everything with everyone. It's time consuming and a challenge that is very upcoming for me right now, because this is where I'm going with YouTube as well, getting people on board to help with editing and so on, is actually managing, creating a system for continuously onboarding people and scaling the teams that we're using. We're operating from Switzerland, and here in Switzerland, hiring, as in permanently hire people, is expensive. A mess. It's expensive, and it's like I don't really see that I'm going to be doing that anytime soon. So we're still using contractors, which is great, but it is a little bit more. There's a higher kind of fluctuation. You typically don't have the same contractor for a year. They come in and help doing some stuff, and then they're out. And making a process for actually handling this fluctuation of people coming in and out and making sure that everything is still covered, the more dependent you become on other people. That's a challenge that I'm dealing with at this very moment, and I'm actively trying to solve.
I think this is like the trickiest part. You're at like the most exciting, I would say, like stage, because you're going to be able to delegate and everything. But again, like I think it's especially like when it comes to audience building and all these things that are time consuming, but you're potentially also like the best person to do it. You know what I mean? Like you're the most qualified, and
that's how it will be, right? And it's a trade-off. It's hard.
I think it was Julian Shapiro who said something like, you whenever you want to delegate, you have to be okay with the fact that the person will only do like 80 to 85% of the job you've been doing before, and that you can coach them to become like 5 or 10% better. So in the end, it's like 95%. And
you can get up there at some point. Absolutely. It's about buying time. It's not about getting people on board that are specialized in doing things that I couldn't do myself at this point, at least for it in a long extent. And I think mentally that does become challenging. I 100% agree, because you were well aware that I could also sit down and do this myself, and at this very moment, at least, do a better result out of it, get a better result out of it. But then where's the time I'm going to spend on all the other things that needs to be done, right?
But that's really, really awesome. I want to kind of like wrap it up, because I want to be cautious of your time. And I usually ask like those 3 questions to other bootstrap entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
The first one is, what is like a book or a podcast that you would recommend?
I'm really happy about a podcast that's called Built to Sell Radio. You can find it on Spotify with a dude called John Warlow. It's great. It's about selling businesses and kind of building businesses with the intent of selling soon. It's great. A lot of great insights on that one. A book, I think I wrote, I read one recently called Storyworthy by a guy called Matthew Dix. It's actually really, really great. And it's about storytelling and how to incorporate it into YouTube videos, ads, where you need it.
I'm gonna check this out.
Writing it down.
And the second question is, with the one bootstrap entrepreneurs that you are following or with like inspiring you?
That would have to be, there's a German guy called Arvid Kahl. He's excellent. You probably know him very well. He bootstrapped a company in only 2 years to a little under $1 million ARR, and then he sold it. And he has since written some absolutely excellent books that are targeted to people who are bootstrapping companies. And then he's a great guy. I'm following him on Twitter. He shares a lot of really great content. So that would definitely be my favorite.
Yeah, it's super nice. I was having a chat with him, I think 5 or 6 days ago. He's very active in also replying and engaging and having conversations with you on Twitter. I've had many discussions with him as well. Like, very great guy. Yeah, definitely. And the last question I ask is, how do you regain energy when like you are facing a downtime or like a tough time?
I shift focus. Plain down. I whenever SaaS is kind of like tough, I remind myself that there's also a YouTube channel I need to grow. Maybe I should put an hour or two into that. When that gets annoying, I remind myself that I also need to think about my ebooks, and then I go back. It's just like the best, as we talked about, like if you sit and give yourself a break, you don't really take a break mentally, but actually shifting focus to me is the best way to keep motivating also when it gets hard.
Awesome. Well, Simon, thanks a lot for sharing all these tips.
Pleasure.
Where can people follow you or get in touch with you?
Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. I'm Simon Højberg, so it's my name just with an O, and that's my handle everywhere.
Nice. So we'll just put the links for everyone.
That's perfect.
Awesome, Simon. Have an awesome day.
Have an awesome day. Thanks a lot.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Bootstrap Stories, the only podcast where Bootstrap entrepreneurs share their journey in all transparency. If you enjoyed this episode, don't hesitate to leave us a review. And in case you want to see the interview, all episodes are live on the YouTube channel. Check out the link in the description and hit subscribe if you haven't already. Have an amazing day and make sure to also join us in our amazing Bootstrap community where we all helped each other to become successful and grow a profitable business. Take care and talk to you soon.